The air inside the Bronx Animal Rescue Center was thick with the scent of damp fur and disinfectant, a place where hope and heartbreak existed side by side. Mike Tyson had stepped into many intense arenas before, from the roar of championship fights to the blinding lights of Hollywood. But this felt different. As he walked through the narrow aisles, the desperate barking of caged dogs echoed around him. Their tails wagged, their eyes filled with longing, pressing against the bars, begging for a chance. A cheerful worker approached him, barely hiding her excitement. "Looking to adopt today, Mr. Tyson?" Mike gave a small nod, scanning the eager puppies bouncing at the front, already glowing with the certainty that they would be chosen. But something pulled his gaze past them, toward the darkened end of the shelter. That's when he saw him. In the last kennel, barely visible in the shadows, sat a tiny, frail puppy. He didn't bark. He didn't wag his tail. His fur was patchy, his ribs faintly visible beneath his fragile frame. One of his legs was missing, his right eye clouded with blindness. He wasn't just ignored. He had already given up. Mike's jaw tightened. What's his story? The shelter worker hesitated. That's Titan. No one's ever wanted him. Mike crouched, locking eyes with the pup. Well, someone wants him now. The decision that stunned everyone. The shelter worker blinked as if she hadn't heard him correctly. You want to adopt Titan? Mike Tyson didn't take his eyes off the tiny, defeated pup curled in the shadows. He had seen fighters broken before, men who had taken one too many hits and no longer had the strength to rise. Titan had that same look, like he had already accepted his fate. But Mike knew what it felt like to be knocked down, to be counted out. And he also knew what it felt like to fight back. "Yeah," he said firmly. "What do I need to do?" A silence spread through the shelter. Nearby volunteers who had been going about their work suddenly turned their heads. It wasn't every day that a heavyweight champion walked through their doors. But it was even more shocking to see him choosing the one dog no one wanted. The worker hesitated. "Mr. Tyson, I have to be honest. Titan, he's not like other dogs. He struggles with movement, needs special care. Most people want a dog that can run, play." Mike cut her off, his voice steady. "Most people aren't me." The words hung in the air. For a moment, the worker didn't move. Then, with a slow breath, she grabbed a clipboard and unlocked the kennel. "All right," she said softly. "Let's get you both sorted." Mike stepped inside the small space, crouching low. His massive frame made the kennel seem even tinier. Titan didn't react. He didn't flinch. He didn't move. It was as if he had already decided that this was just another false hope. "Hey, buddy," Mike murmured. He extended a hand slowly, giving the pup time to decide. Titan didn't sniff, didn't nuzzle, just stared. Seconds stretched. Then, with the tiniest shift, Titan's nose twitched. He inhaled slightly, his one good eye locked on Mike's massive hand. Another beat passed, and then, almost imperceptibly, he moved, just enough to press his nose against Mike's palm. That was it. Mike grinned. "That's what I thought." With careful hands, he lifted the fragile pup. Titan weighed almost nothing, his heartbeat rapid against Mike's chest. Yet, in that moment, he felt heavier than any championship belt Mike had ever carried. The shelter worker handed him a pen. "Just sign here," she said, still a little stunned. "I'll grab a leash." Mike held Titan close, feeling the pup press against him. Like, for the first time, he didn't want to be alone. As the paperwork was finalized, other visitors froze in place. Some pulled out their phones, recording. Some whispered. But Mike didn't care. He looked down at the trembling pup in his arms and whispered, "You just got yourself a family." For the first time since stepping into that shelter, Titan let out a slow, shaky breath, and for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid. What happens next will shock you. As Mike Tyson carried Titan out of the shelter, cameras flashed. The world was about to witness something incredible. But what happened next? You won't believe how Titan responded when he reached his new home. Do you think Titan will adapt to his new life? Comment number Titan strong if you believe in him. Would you have chosen Titan, or would you have picked a perfect puppy? Tell me below. If this story touched your heart, Hit that like button and subscribe for part 3. You won't want to miss what happens next. The car ride was silent. Titan lay curled in Mike Tyson's lap, his tiny body trembling with each uneven breath. He hadn't moved since they left the shelter, not once. His good eyes stared blankly at the door, his small paws limp. It was as if he refused to believe this was real, like he was simply waiting for the moment when he'd be left behind again. Mike felt the unease in the pup's frame, the stiffness, the hesitation. He had seen that kind of fear before, not in animals, but in people. Fighters who had been beaten too many times, who no longer believed they could stand again. The car pulled into the long driveway of Mike's estate. Massive gates slid open, revealing a home so grand it could make anyone feel small. The front lawn stretched wide, the mansion's towering entrance gleaming under the afternoon sun. But Titan wasn't impressed. He didn't wag his tail. He didn't even lift his head. Mike stepped inside, shutting the door behind him. Silence. No barking dogs. No echo of shelter doors slamming. No sounds of people debating which pet to take home. Just quiet. Titan remained still as Mike set him down on a plush dog bed, the softest one he could find. It was brand new, untouched, perfect. But the pup didn't react. He simply lay there, his frail body curled tight, his eyes staring at nothing. Mike crouched beside him, voice low and calm. "All right, buddy," he said. "I know this is new. I know you're scared. But you're safe now." Titan didn't move. The first few days were rough. He barely touched his food, nibbling just enough to keep going. His water bowl sat mostly untouched. Every small sound, a door creaking, a chair scraping, made his body jolt, his muscles tensing as if he was expecting something bad to happen. Walking was the worst. The smooth, polished floors of the mansion were nothing like the rough, familiar concrete of the shelter. Titan struggled with every step. His missing leg made him wobble, his balance unsteady. Every few steps he'd slip, his frail body crashing down. And every time he hesitated longer before trying again, as if he was debating whether it was even worth it. Mike watched it all, and he refused to let Titan give up. Every morning he sat on the floor, patiently feeding Titan by hand. He placed towels on the floors, giving the pup a little more grip. He guided him slowly, step by step, never rushing, never forcing. At night, when Titan would wake up trembling, Mike would place a hand on his back, steady and warm, until the pup drifted back to sleep. Then, one morning, something changed. Mike was sitting on the couch, scrolling through messages when he heard a faint tapping sound. A soft, rhythmic tap, tap, tap. He turned his head. Titan was walking toward him. It wasn't graceful, it wasn't fast, but it was happening. The pup was making his way across the floor, one unsteady step at a time. Mike set his phone down, his eyes locked on the tiny dog. He didn't speak, didn't move. He just watched. Titan took another step, then another. His body wobbled, but this time, he didn't fall. Finally, he reached Mike's feet and stopped. A pause, a deep breath. Then, for the first time since arriving, Titan nudged his head against Mike's leg. Mike exhaled, a slow grin spreading across his face. "Look at you, champ." Titan didn't understand words, but somehow in that moment, he understood this. He wasn't alone, and for the first time in his life, he let himself believe it. Titan's fight to belong. The days turned into weeks, and Titan's progress was slow but steady. He still had moments of doubt, times when he would hesitate before taking a step, as if expecting failure. But every day he got a little stronger. Every day Mike made sure Titan knew that this was his home, for good. But the real test was yet to come. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows over the mansion's backyard, Mike decided it was time. He carried Titan outside, stepping onto the grass, the breeze rustling through the trees. The backyard was massive, stretching out like a private park, fenced in for safety. Titan had never seen this much open space before. Mike set him down gently. The pup stood still for a moment, his one good eye scanning the unfamiliar world around him. The grass felt strange beneath his paws, too soft, too unpredictable. His body tensed, as if his instinct was telling him to stay still, stay small, don't take up space. Mike crouched beside him. "You got this, champ," he murmured. Titan hesitated, then lifted one paw. He took a step, then another. The uneven ground challenged his balance, but he pushed forward until he reached the first obstacle. A small wooden ramp, barely a few inches high, lay in the middle of the yard. A normal dog wouldn't have even noticed it, but for Titan, it was a wall. He stopped short, his muscles tightening. His breathing quickened. Mike saw the change instantly. This wasn't just hesitation. This was fear. Titan knew what failure felt like. He had felt it over and over. Every time he had been overlooked, every time he had fallen, every time he had been left behind. Mike knew that feeling too. He sat down on the grass beside Titan, his voice steady. "Listen, I've been there," he said. "When I was a kid, people counted me out, said I wouldn't make it. They looked at me the same way they looked at you in that shelter." Titan's ear twitched. Mike rested a hand lightly on the pup's back. "You ain't that dog anymore. You're Titan, and Titans don't quit." Titan's tiny chest rose and fell rapidly. His eye flickered between Mike and the ramp. Then something changed. It was small, just a shift in posture, a slight lean forward. But Mike recognized it for what it was. A decision. Titan lifted his front paw and placed it on the ramp. He hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then he pushed up. His back leg wobbled. His balance faltered. But he didn't stop. He dug his claws into the wood and forced himself forward. Mike held his breath. Titan made it to the top. The moment stretched, silent, still, before Titan took his final step down onto the other side. And just like that, he had done it. Mike exhaled, a slow, satisfied grin spreading across his face. Titan turned back toward him, his tiny body trembling from the effort. His eye locked onto Mike's. There was no fear now. There was fire. Mike chuckled. "That's my boy." From that moment on, Titan was different. He walked with a little more confidence, ate with a little more hunger, slept without jolting awake in fear. Because for the first time in his life, he believed he belonged. The night was quiet. Too quiet. Mike Tyson had left for a business event in Los Angeles, and the massive estate stood dark and still, with only a few security guards patrolling outside. Inside, Titan lay curled up on his favorite spot, a soft corner in the living room. His breathing was steady, his small body rising and falling with each breath. He had come a long way from the trembling pup in that cold shelter. He was stronger now, safer. But that safety was about to be tested. A shadow moved beyond the iron gates. The motion sensors blinked, catching a brief flicker of movement, but nothing more. The figure, dressed in all black, crept toward the back entrance, avoiding cameras with practiced precision. He had been watching the house for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. And with Mike gone, he knew this was it. Titan stirred. His ears twitched. His body, once relaxed, tensed. Something wasn't right. Then came the sound, faint, barely noticeable, the click of a lock being tampered with. Titan's good eye snapped open. His breathing changed. His small frame stiffened. Another click. Titan pushed himself up, his muscles still weak, but his instincts razor sharp. His world had always been one of survival. And right now, everything in him screamed danger. The back door creaked open just an inch. A gloved hand slipped through, pushing the door wider. The intruder stepped inside. The house was dark, the silence swallowing every footstep. The man moved cautiously, scanning for alarms, his gloved hands moving swiftly as he searched for valuables, confident, unbothered, until he heard it. A low, deep growl. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. Enough to stop him in his tracks. The man turned, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. There, standing in the center of the room, was Titan, small, frail, but unmoving. His single good eye locked onto the stranger. His lips curled, revealing small but sharp teeth. His tiny body trembled, not from fear, but from something else. Determination. The intruder let out a low chuckle. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered, taking a step forward. Titan didn't move. Another step. Then, without warning, Titan lunged. The man wasn't ready. He had expected barking, maybe a scared dog scurrying away. Not this. Titan latched onto his leg, his small teeth sinking into flesh through the fabric of the man's pants. The intruder let out a curse, stumbling back, knocking over a table in the process. The loud crash triggered the alarm system. Instantly, the estate was flooded with flashing lights and a piercing siren. Outside, security guards sprang into action. The intruder panicked. He kicked, trying to shake Titan off, but the little dog held on. His entire body was weak, but his grip was iron. Then, finally, Titan let go. The man staggered backward, gasping, but before he could move, the front door burst open. Two security guards tackled him to the ground. He struggled, but it was over. Titan stood there, panting, his tiny chest rising and falling rapidly. His one eye flickered between the intruder and the security team. He had done it. He had protected his home. Titan becomes a legend. The alarms blared through the estate, flashing red lights flooding the once quiet mansion. Security had the intruder pinned to the ground, shouting commands, their weapons drawn. The man was face down, groaning in pain, clutching the spot where Titan had sunk his teeth in. Then, as if the chaos wasn't enough, a phone rang. It was Mike. The head of security picked up immediately. "Sir, we have a situation." Mike's voice, calm but sharp, cut through the commotion. "What happened?" A beat of hesitation. Then, the response that no one expected. "It was Titan, sir. He stopped an intruder." Silence. Mike didn't speak for a moment. His grip on the phone tightened. He had seen Titan struggle to eat, to walk, to trust. And now they were telling him that this tiny broken dog had defended his home. "You're telling me," Mike finally said, his voice low, "that my dog just took down a full-grown man?" "Yes, sir," he didn't hesitate. Mike let out a slow exhale. Then he laughed, a deep, proud, almost disbelieving chuckle. "That's my boy." By the time Mike's jet landed the next morning, the world already knew. Security footage of the break-in had been leaked, and it had gone viral. Millions of people watched as a tiny, three-legged pup stood his ground against an armed intruder. The video flooded social media, news stations, and talk shows. Mike pulled into his driveway to find reporters waiting outside his gate. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing, celebrities, fans, even law enforcement officials reaching out. But none of that mattered, because inside, curled up in his favorite corner, was Titan. Mike walked over and crouched beside him. The little dog lifted his head, his good eye blinking up at Mike. "You're a legend now, buddy," Mike murmured, scratching behind Titan's ear. "Took you long enough." Titan simply let out a soft exhale and nudged his head against Mike's hand. It wasn't about fame, wasn't about recognition. For Titan, this was home. What happens next will shock you. Titan's story isn't over. You won't believe what happened when one message from a fan changed everything. Did you expect Titan to become a hero? Comment number Titan the Warrior if you did. What would you do if Titan was your dog? Let me know below. Smash that like button and subscribe for part 7. You won't believe what's coming next. Titan's impact on the world. Mike sat on his couch, scrolling through his phone. It had been less than 24 hours since the world learned about Titan's bravery. And yet, his inbox was flooded with thousands of messages. Fans, celebrities, animal lovers. Everyone was talking about the dog no one wanted. News stations ran the footage on repeat. Talk show hosts debated whether Titan was the most inspiring rescue dog of all time. Animal shelters across the country reported something unexpected: a surge in adoptions. People weren't just inspired by Titan's courage. They were moved by his story. The world had seen what Mike had seen the first day he stepped into that shelter: a warrior. And now, because of Titan, other unwanted dogs were finally getting a chance. Mike scrolled through post after post. A man in Texas had adopted a three-legged pit bull named Rusty. A family in Oregon took in an elderly blind lab that had been overlooked for months. In New York, a paralyzed dachshund named Bella was now the newest member of a loving home. Titan had started a movement. Mike exhaled, setting his phone down. He glanced over at Titan, who was stretched out beside him, resting after his big night. The little dog had no idea what he had done. No idea that he had just changed the lives of so many others like him. The doorbell rang. Mike stood, walking to the entrance. When he opened the door, a delivery man stood there, holding a small box. "For Titan," the man said with a grin. Mike raised an eyebrow, but took the package, thanking him before shutting the door. He carried the box back to the couch and set it down. Titan lifted his head, sniffing curiously as Mike peeled back the tape. Inside was a small black velvet case. Mike opened it and froze. Inside was a custom-made medal. A small card was tucked beneath it. "To Titan for bravery beyond measure, for proving that strength is not in size, but in heart. From all of us who now see the overlooked a little differently, thank you." Mike swallowed hard. He turned to Titan, who was now sitting up, looking at him with his one good eye, head tilted slightly. Mike chuckled, shaking his head. "You really don't get it, do you?" Titan blinked. Mike lifted the medal and placed it gently around Titan's neck. The small golden emblem rested against his fur, gleaming under the soft light. Titan didn't react much, just let out a slow breath before curling up again, completely unbothered. To him, nothing had changed. But to the world, Titan wasn't just a dog anymore. He was a symbol, more than a rescue, a family. The world had crowned Titan a hero. The news, the headlines, the viral videos, his story had touched millions. But inside Mike Tyson's home, none of that mattered. To Titan, fame meant nothing. Medals didn't change the way he curled up in his favorite spot, or the way he still hesitated before taking his first steps in the morning. He wasn't a superhero, he wasn't a symbol. He was just a dog. And to Mike, he wasn't a viral sensation. He wasn't some inspirational story for the world to admire. He was family. That evening, Mike sat on the back porch, the sun dipping below the horizon, casting a golden glow across the sprawling yard. Titan lay beside him, his small body stretched out, his breathing slow and steady. The soft jingling of his new medal barely made a sound as he shifted closer. Mike ran a hand over the pup's fur, his fingers tracing the scars hidden beneath the soft patches. Scars from a life that had never been kind. "You know," Mike murmured, his voice quieter than usual. "They called you Unwanted." Titan flicked his ears, his eye half-lidded but still listening. Mike exhaled, shaking his head. "But look at you now." Titan lifted his head just slightly, enough to glance at him. That eye, the one that still saw, still fought, still believed, held something deep, something unspoken. Mike chuckled softly. "I thought I was rescuing you," he admitted, rubbing Titan's head gently. "But maybe you were rescuing me too." The world still buzzed about Titan's bravery. People sent gifts, letters, donations in his name. But in that quiet moment, with the warm breeze rustling the trees and the weight of something real settling between them, none of that mattered. Titan wasn't a stray anymore. He wasn't broken. He wasn't overlooked. He was home. And for the first time in his life, he knew it.